Folks, good afternoon, and welcome to this week's edition of the Snakebite, our weekly sports show that airs every single Wednesday at noon. I'm John 𝙃𝙀 with James Simpson saying thank you so much for tuning into FSC TV. And James, we got a bit of a different show on hand this week. Today we look at the 10 other teams in the Sunshine State Conference, see how they stack up with each other, and of course the Florida Southern College mocks. All that coming up next. Here is this week's edition of the Snakebite.
That is right, John. This is going to be a unique show in which the primary focus is actually the other teams in the conference. You and I will both confer on our own power rankings for both men's and women's basketball as conference play gets underway. But first, let's recap the week in moccasin athletics as we saw both teams split their pair of games this week. Last Wednesday, the men defeated Eckerd College behind a big second half and a dominant team effort. Jaden Booth with 16 points to push the Mocs to 7-0 on the season.
Yeah, and unfortunately, James, they saw their undefeated season come to an end as they lost to Barry University on the road this past Saturday, 86-85. It was another game that came down to the final play, but this time it was the Mocs who were on the losing end for the first time this year. Despite 21 points, another big day from 𝙃𝙃𝙀. They played well, but it wasn't enough for the victory as they turned their attention to Florida Tech on Saturday. The women split their matchups this week as well as they pulled off the win over Barry after falling to Eckerd.
Yeah, John, it was a good effort for the Mocs as they saw their 5-game win streak end with a loss to nationally ranked Eckerd. They responded well with a win over Barry on the road, though, as Dominica Zamora posted 18 points and Ashley Schell notched a double-double to boost the Mocs to a 69-57 win. They now move to 6-2 as they'll get Florida Tech on the road before returning home to compete in the Mocs Christmas Classic, which we'll talk about more next week.
Yeah, not a bad start for the Moccasins, of course, by any stretch there. For those squads, the men's team takes their first loss. The women's team gets a loss and then right back on track with a win over Barry. So, like we said, this is where things will get a little more interesting. Let's talk about the other teams in the conference. Of course, the Mocs competing in the Sunshine State Conference among 10 other teams. In spirit of fairness here, as part of the FSC TV media group, we're not going to talk about the Moccasins at all in this one. They are not part of our rankings, so we'll go 1 through 10 among the other 10 teams in the conference. And let's start with the men's side. And you know, I think, as we'll see here, no surprise to see the #1 team in the power rankings is still the Nova Southeastern University Sharks, James. 7-0 start to their season.
𝙃𝙃𝙀, they play basketball unlike any other Division II team I've ever seen play basketball. They're outscoring opponents by an average of 30 points per game. They're second, which is the second in the country, the best scoring offense in the country at 102 points per game. They're incredible.
Yeah, and they're led by Dallas Graziani. He's named the Conference Player of the Week this past week. He's one of the best point guards in the nation, a 3.23 assist-turnover ratio. They are picking up right where they left off after making it super far in the NCAA Division II tournament. 2-0 in the conference already this year. Again, they're the #1 team until somebody else loses. But that'll bring us to our #2 team, and they have had a fantastic start to this season. The Florida Tech Panthers coming in with a record of 8-1. They are on a 4-game winning streak, and they look pretty good.
Yeah, definitely has been surprising me. I haven't had the opportunity to see them play at all, but they've already got 3 conference wins over St. Leo, Tampa, and Lynn, with their 1 loss coming to a Puerto Rican team. 4-game win streak right now. Yeah,
and they have the best scoring defense in the conference. And we just touched about the Sharks. They're averaging over 100 points per game offensively, but you know what they say, defense wins championships. So that team in Melbourne, they're averaging under 63 points per game, and should be an interesting matchup as they will take on the #14th ranked Florida Southern College Moccasins this Saturday. That should be good as we start to see a little bit more of how teams shake up here in the conference.
Yeah, I know you said you didn't want to mention the Mocs rankings-wise, but that'll be interesting to see how they're able to come back from their first loss of that season, that heartbreaker against Barry. And speaking of, next up we got #3, Barry, an interesting start to the season, who've lost twice by a combined 4 points. It seems to be a common theme for some of the SSC teams. But after losing to Tampa by 3 to start their conference schedule, they've rebounded nicely.
Yeah, they got the big win, as you mentioned, over Florida Southern. But this is one of those things early on in the season. We've got so many teams that we'll touch on here throughout the rest of the show. But it's Barry with only 5 games under their belt. They're 3-2, a conference record of 1-1. But I think they're a lot better than their record states. Coming on a 2-game winning streak now. You mentioned the loss to Tampa, but they look pretty solid here, and that's why they're #3 in the power rankings. Well, let's go ahead and take a look at #4. They're another one of these nationally renowned teams, the Embry-Riddle Eagles, James, with a record of 6-2.
Yeah, they're 6-2 like you said. They haven't had that big conference win yet, I don't believe, but they've got a couple huge quality in-region teams. They beat Rollins. They beat Misspoke. Rollins. That's an SSC conference team. But they had a big win over Flagler and West Georgia. The big blemish, though, their 2-game losing streak right now.
Yeah, and that's the reason why they're number 4. I mean, Embry-Riddle's a great team. You can expect them to be relevant here throughout the rest of the conference schedule. They rank 3rd in the country, over 46 rebounds per game. They have the best rebound margin per game as well. Michael McAllister, he's a big guy over there for the Eagles.
Doing great work.
Averaging nearly 10 rebounds per game as they look to try to replace some of the players they lost from last year.
Yeah, now rounding off the top half of our men's rankings of the 10 we're doing, we've got number 5, St. Leo, who they're 5-3 headed into a battle with Eckerd on Saturday, but they should, there's that argument that, like, if you run it back a couple times, they should be 6-2.
Yeah, they saw a huge lead slip away and then lost at Wisconsin Parkside earlier this season. That's one that they want back against a team all the way from up in Wisconsin. But other than that loss, they've fallen to nationally ranked Alabama Huntsville and then the 8-1 Florida Tech team. So in the early goings of this season, a 5-3 St. Leo team with an overall record. They do have that big marquee win over Embry-Riddle, as we just talked about a moment ago. So yeah, they're another one of those top 5 teams in this conference.
Yeah, and another team that is has a win over Embry-Riddle, which has kind of been our standard for the last couple teams. The Spartans, Tampa, they have a win over Embry-Riddle and Barry, but those 2 wins came by just 4 combined points, like we were talking about a little earlier. And Tampa has lost their 5 other games this season, so it's too early to tell.
Yeah, it's a weird situation for the Spartans. I mean, we always talk about any given day, anybody can beat anybody. Tampa is 2-5 right now. They've 2 huge wins over Embry-Riddle and Barry, who we have ranked higher, on our rankings here. But the problem is they've lost their other 5 games. So too early to tell. We'll see how they're able to shape up against more of the other teams in the conference. They're going to need to try to rebound with a nice little winning streak to get themselves back up over 500. Well, let's look at the other team over in the Bay Area. The Eckerd College Tritons competing out of St. Petersburg, 3-3 to start their season.
Yeah, and it's been they've had a tough go of it, the Tritons have. They're currently that 3-game losing streak. They lost to the previously undefeated Moccasins and then the currently undefeated Sharks, 2 pretty solid teams if you don't, Eckerd going to take on St. Leo this Saturday.
Yeah, it should be a pretty telling game to see what direction their season's headed. Yeah, they started the season 3-0 before this 3-game skid against a couple of great teams that hadn't had a loss coming in. So we'll see where Eckerd's going. You said it, a big game against St. Leo. Well, let's look at Palm Beach Atlantic, and this is one of those, the teams that have 7-8 games under their belt. You can see a little more. For this PBA team, they're 3-2 on the season. They take that a winning record, and so despite the fact that they're 8th in the rankings, that's more of a testament to the fact that we just haven't seen a whole bunch of them yet this season.
Yeah, but the one thing is they've got that 3-game homestead. They hopefully build a little more momentum going into the break, coming out of that break in January where the schedule really feels like it starts to wrap up. Of those 3 games, a big highlighted matchup with Nova Southeastern this Saturday.
Yeah, and this is really an opportunity where they can take a jump in our rankings, if you will, and then in the standings, of course, as well. Anytime you get to face the Sharks, it should be an interesting showdown.
Great opportunity.
Yeah. Well, let's look at the Rollins College Tars, who will come in at number 9 in our rankings with a 3-4 record this season. They have been extremely competitive in their losses this year, losing to Embry-Riddle, Palm Beach Atlantic, and Flagler, but all of those games by single digits, a couple possessions at the end of the game.
Yeah, they lost by Flagler by just 1. In those games, those are tough losses when they come down to the final shot, but they'll be away from home until January 1st with matchups with Barry and Eckerd on the trip. So a couple good opportunities again.
Yeah, and it's a tough break for Rollins. They're not going to be home for the rest of December until the new year. They will be away from their home. So we'll see how they're able to face off against Barry and Eckerd, chance to move up in the standings.
Now to round out those standings, the Lynn Fighting Knights, they're 1-5 on the season. They've had a rough go of it, lost to Florida Tech, Nova Southeastern, and Eckerd by double digits, and they're going to continue to be scrappy, have to be scrappy, facing Embry-Riddle and Florida Southern on the road to close out their calendar year.
Yeah, so there you have it. Those are our top 10 here for the men's basketball power rankings, and we'll try to get these more out to you every single week, and especially as more games come in, we see upsets every single week. These are our top 10 in men's basketball as of December 5th, before Wednesday night's games. Well, let's go ahead and switch perspectives. Let's look at the women's side of things, James, where sometimes you see the men's and women's teams are performing at similar levels. Other times you don't. I mean, we have seen a lot of just fantastic basketball across the board before these teams really get into the heat of their conference schedule. So many teams with winning records. All the teams are winning at some extent or another. Let's take a look at our top 10, and we'll lead it off with number 1.
Yeah, sure. And the number 1, you could go Eckerd, you could go Tampa, but we've chosen to go with Eckerd. When you look at the numbers, it really is amazing. They made it to the second round of the NCAA tournament last season, and they've looked sharp so far. They are 7-1, having despite only 1 home game, so they're I think 6-1 on the road, right?
Or neutral sites, yeah.
Or neutral sites, yeah, excuse me. And they're riding a 4-game win streak right now.
Yeah, and you said it. I mean, they're 7-1. Their lone loss of the season came to Angelo State, a team out of Texas, the Lone Star Conference. They're not nationally ranked, but Eckhart has already knocked off 3 ranked opponents this season. They beat number 22 ranked Valdosta State, 9th ranked Bentley, and then the big one, over 16th ranked Nova Southeastern. And again, all of those were either on the road or in neutral site contests. So that's telling for a team that is 7-1. They went to the NCAA tournament last season. They look sharp this year as well.
Yeah, that's one heck of a hit list. They also lead the conference in assist turnover ratio and field goal percentage defense, while point guard Lauren Vieira leads the country with 63 assists.
And this is a situation where you can't take anything away from the team that we have ranked number 2 in the conference. The University of Tampa Spartans are 8-0. They haven't given anybody any reason to doubt them at all, but we have to give some credit where it's due to Eckhart, who's come away with 3 nationally ranked wins. But for the Spartans, they've got wins over Embry-Riddle, Florida Tech, Barry, and they look just as good here to open up the season.
Yeah, Sydney Kinn is leading the conference, 9.5 boards per game, which is just great. And their defense is conference best. The team allows just 57.5 points per game through 8 so far.
Yeah, and the Spartans play clean too. They're 4th in the country in fouls per games, under 13 per contest, and here is a huge momentum builder for the Spartans. They just started a 5-game homestand. They're out on an 8-game winning streak, looking to build some momentum here in the Sunshine State.
Yeah, now let's move on to our 3rd-ranked team. We've got the Nova Southeastern Sharks, and John, those basketball teams know how to play offense heavy, put the pressure on, score lots of points. I believe they are, let me look for it in my notes. I mean, Maddie Fredericks had 2 30-point games already.
Yeah,
come on.
I know, that's unbelievable. And this is one of the things we talk about. This Sharks team is 7-1, and we have them 3rd in the conference here to start the season. They have been really a high-flying team, one of the more fun teams to watch in the conference. You said it, Maddie Frederick, 18.5 points per game. That is tied for the conference lead. Well, the high-flying Sharks offense, they are 11th in the country. They average 82 points per game. Team 1st in the conference. They're averaging over 10 3-pointers per contest. They have just 1 conference win so far this season over Lynn. They are set for a 4-game homestead after the Saturday's battle with PBA. And their only loss this season was to the number 1 ranked team we have right here, Eckhart.
Yeah, and we talked about Tampa's leading the defense with 57.5 points per game. St. Leo, 4th up. We were talking about how good the Sharks offense were. St. Leo's been great, averaging 83 points per game.
Yeah, that's good for 7th in the country, so you can't take anything away from the St. Leo team. Defensively, they're also doing strong. They're ranked 6th in the nation per your point there. 14.4 steals per game. We talked about the Spartans with an 8-0 record. Excellent defensive team, 1st in the conference, but 14.4 steals per game for the Lions. They're also top 10 in turnover margin. They're plus 9.7. And again, through 7 games, that's really impressive to see. They have the 2nd best scoring defense in the conference, behind only Tampa, averaging 57.7 points per game allowed. Yeah,
my mistake.
You got there. But the only real blemish for this team was a little bit of a puzzling loss to Palm Beach Atlantic on Saturday. It interrupted their 6-game win streak to start their year. But again, phenomenal start for the Lions, looking to get back on track.
Yeah, and a highlighted matchup this Saturday, St. Leo against Eckhart. Should be interesting, a great opportunity to really solidify themselves as a threat in this conference.
And you said it, 2 one-loss teams. That's going to be a good one. Well, this is where things start to get really bunched together. And we'll go ahead and introduce our number 5 team here for women's basketball. It's the Lynn University Fighting Knights. They appear to be a really good team. You see the record there. They're 6-2 to start their season. However, James, their 2 losses coming to nationally ranked Eckhart and Nova Southeastern, and they weren't close.
No, but it's good that those losses happened early on in the season, in the months of November and December, when people are still ramping up. Those teams will see those teams again when the conference season really starts to heat up in January. And those were big losses. You had the one to Eckhart. That's tough. It's tough to lose by that margin.
31-point loss. Yeah, it's a tough one. But to your point, they're shooting the ball at about a 50% rate this season.
Unbelievable.
You're not going to win a lot of. You're not going to lose a lot of games, rather, when you're shooting the ball like that. And so good to see that they were able to rebound, even with that outlier, it appears, with that loss to Eckhart. Well, let's go ahead and look at our number 6 team, Palm Beach Atlantic. And I preface this by saying these are where teams get really close together and really hard to tell who is where. But the Sailfish, 4-2 on the season, 2-1 in conference play. They defeated St. Leo and Rollins already here in the early portion of the season.
Yeah, they're playing well. They're coming up with wins, but that earlier loss to Florida Southern by 15 really sunk them a little bit in their rankings. And it's It's a little early to read, only 4-2, only 6 games played, but it'll be interesting to see how they fare against the nationally ranked Nova Southeastern Sharks this Saturday.
Yeah, that ought to be a good one, a battle between our number 3 and number 6 teams here. Well, another close team right on in there. It's the Embry-Riddle Eagles coming in at number 7 with a record of 4-3 so far this season.
Yeah, this is another team that's been tough to kind of tell where they are. They haven't really proven themselves against a higher class teams. They've beaten the Tars as part of their 4-game win streak, but then they have lost 4 straight, including double-digit losses to St. Leo and Tampa.
Yeah, and that's really where a lot of their stock has fallen, is this tough losing streak that they've had as of late. But we'll see where they're able to turn their season around. We look at the number 8 team, the Rollins College Chargers, in a very similar situation.
Yeah, 3-4. The only exception being that the Eagles beat Rollins by 2 earlier this season. But again, they've yet to play a nationally ranked team and have a couple sizable losses on their resume. They fell to PBA earlier this week, and they will head to Barry this Saturday. That
brings us to our number 9 team in the ranking, the University of Barry, coming in at number 9 in our first power rankings of the year.
Yeah, I feel like I'm broken record here a little bit. It's tough to say so early in the year. They have losses to Florida Southern and Tampa. They're still looking for their first conference win, which could happen as they take on Barry and Rollins and Embry-Riddle this month.
Yeah, 3-5 record for the Bucks, and they've held in there with a lot of good teams. But as you said, they're still looking for that first really marquee win. Well, let's go ahead and take a look at our number 10 team for women's basketball here. It's the Florida Tech Panthers, and I'll be the one who's the broken record this time. The Panthers have played just 4 games this season, and so it's hard to tell. They're 1-3 on the season. They split a pair of contests with Flagler College up in St. Augustine, and so it's just tough to tell. They've lost to Lynn and Tampa, and we just haven't seen enough basketball out of this Panthers team to know really where they stand up. They took on St. Leo last night after our production time. Check back on FloridaTechSports.com for results there. But there you go, our top 10 here for women's basketball this week in our power rankings. And just look at those records. This could be all switched up by this time next week.
Absolutely. And, they talked about the SSC for a reason. It's a very competitive conference across all sports, especially basketball, and it's really exciting. One of my favorite parts about the wintertime is following the basketball teams, both men's and women's, and it's shaping up to be a great year of basketball in the SSC Conference.
You said it, James. Well, we thank you so much for tuning in to FSC TV. For us here at Florida Southern College, we've got the Mocs Christmas Classic coming up this coming up weekend. Yeah, about a week and a half away from the annual event here at the George Jenkins Fieldhouse. So we'll see some more great Sunshine State Conference basketball. Well, that'll do it for this week's edition of the Snakebite. I'm John Kristovich with James Simpson saying thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you next Wednesday.